Take off your shoes, don't dirty the floors. This isn't your barn. My daughter's voice was sharp, dismissive, like I was some delivery guy who'd tracked mud through her perfect foyer. She stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to obey, while her friends watched from the living room. I looked at her for a long moment. This girl I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. Now speaking to me like I was nothing. I bent down and quietly unlaced my boots, set them neatly by the door. She was still smiling when I walked in. That didn't last long. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The car doors slammed shut in unison, echoing off the pristine driveway. I hefted the bags from the trunk, expensive wine, gourmet cheese, flowers for the new house, everything I'd carefully selected for my daughter's special day. Dad, let me help you with those. She appeared at my side, reaching for one of the bags. I've got them, honey. You go enjoy your big day. David locked the car, surveying their property with obvious satisfaction. Their friends emerged from their vehicles, chatting excitedly about the house, the neighborhood, the accomplishment. As we walked toward the entrance, I couldn't help but offer some observations. Beautiful house, though you might want to consider getting some motion sensor lights for the walkway. Security is important in neighborhoods like this. My daughter glanced at David. A quick look I almost missed. We have a security system, Dad, she said. It's all handled. Of course, but exterior lighting is different. I could install some for you next weekend, no problem. We're good. David's voice was polite but firm. We've got a contractor for that stuff. I nodded, shifting the bags as we reached the front door. Their friends clustered around, admiring the landscaping, the architectural details. The craftsmanship on this brickwork is impressive, I said, running my hand along the wall. Though those oak trees are going to need trimming in a few years. Gets expensive if you let them overgrow near the power lines. Dad, my daughter's tone had shifted slightly. We know. Right, of course. Just thinking ahead. I tried to laugh it off. You know, this reminds me of when we looked at that house on Maple Street. Remember? You were maybe 12, and you said, Dad, could you maybe not with the childhood stories today? She glanced toward her friends, embarrassment flickering across her face. These are my colleagues. The words stung. Oh, sure. Sorry. David was already unlocking the door, and everyone moved toward the entrance. I handed the bags to my daughter. Here, take these. I forgot something in the car. What did you forget? She asked, but there was impatience in her voice now. Just a little something extra. Won't be a minute. As I turned to head back, I heard her mutter to David, just loud enough for me to catch. He always has to make everything about him, doesn't he? The words hit like a physical blow. I kept walking toward the car, my chest tight, trying to process what I'd just heard. My own daughter, talking about me like I was some burden, some embarrassment she had to manage in front of her new life. I reached into the car and grabbed the small, wrapped box from the glove compartment, a vintage compass I'd found at an antique shop. Something meaningful, something that spoke to new beginnings and finding your way. I'd been so excited to give it to her. Now it felt heavy in my hands. When I turned back toward the house, I could see them all through the open doorway. Animated conversation, laughter, glasses already being filled. My daughter stood in the center of it all, radiant and confident, completely in her element. I walked back across the driveway, box in hand, watching this tableau of her success, her real life, the life where I apparently didn't quite fit. As I reached the threshold, she turned and saw me approaching. Take off your shoes, don't dirty the floors. This isn't your barn. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I stood there, small wrapped box in my hand, looking at my daughter. This woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved without condition. She stared back at me with arms crossed, waiting for compliance. I blinked. Then I chuckled, a soft, genuinely amused sound that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. Well, I said, setting the box down carefully and reaching for my laces, that's an interesting way to welcome your father. I pulled off one boot, then the other, taking my time. Tell me, sweetheart, since when do you talk to me like I'm some stranger tracking mud through your life? Her jaw tightened. Dad, I just asked you to take off your shoes. It's not a big deal. You're right. I straightened up in my socks, boots neatly placed by the door. It's not about the shoes at all, is it? I looked around the pristine foyer, then back at her. Because I seem to remember you living in that barn for 25 years. Remember that little place where we saved every penny together so you could afford a house like this? The room went dead silent. Her friends studied their hands, their phones, anything but us. You're being dramatic, she said, but her voice had an edge now. And for the record, I didn't have a choice about where to live back then. I was a kid. But this is my house now, with my rules. You made me follow your rules when I lived under your roof, so now you can follow mine. Fair enough, I nodded slowly. Your house, your rules. I can respect that. I gestured around the foyer at her friends, still in their shoes, still standing comfortably on her pristine floors. But I'm curious, do these rules apply to everyone, or just to me? She followed my gaze, and I watched her face change as she realized what I was pointing out. David in his expensive loafers, her friends in their designer heels and dress shoes, all standing on the same floor as she just declared off limits to my boots. That's different, she said, but the certainty was wavering. Different how? I kept my voice calm, genuinely curious. Help me understand the logic here. Color rose in her cheeks. They're guests. And what am I? The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and telling. One of her friends, tall guy with expensive glasses, cleared his throat. Maybe we should all just... I'm sorry. I turned to him with a polite smile. I don't think we've been properly introduced, but this is a family conversation, and unless you're planning to help with the dishes later, I'd suggest you find something useful to do. I gestured toward the kitchen counter. Maybe slice that cheese we brought? The man's mouth opened, then closed. He looked to my daughter for rescue, but she was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. David stepped forward, hands raised in a peacekeeping gesture. Hey, let's all just take a breath here. This is supposed to be a celebration. You're absolutely right, David. I nodded at my son-in-law. This should be a celebration. I looked back at my daughter, still standing in her heels on those precious floors. So tell me again about these rules of yours. Because from where I'm standing, well, standing in my socks, it seems like some people are more equal than others in your house. Her expression hardened. It's my house. I decide who takes their shoes off and who doesn't. Ah, I nodded slowly. So it's not about the floors at all. It's about power, about putting me in my place. I looked around at her friends, all of them suddenly very interested in their phones. I have to say, that's quite a performance for your audience. Don't you dare. Don't I dare what? Point out the truth? I picked up the small box from where I'd set it down. You know what? You're right. It is your house, and you've made your position very clear. The tension hung in the air like smoke. Her friends exchanged glances. David cleared his throat, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the hum of their expensive refrigerator. I looked around at the beautiful space, at the people who belonged here, at my daughter who was still staring at me with defiant eyes. Well, I said finally, I suppose we should get this celebration started properly. I headed toward the kitchen. Let me get these appetizers arranged. Can't have a housewarming without proper food, can we? I began unpacking the bags, methodically arranging cheese on one of their pristine white plates. The silence from the foyer stretched behind me like a held breath, broken only by the soft murmur of uncomfortable conversations trying to restart. Oh, this looks incredible! I turned to find one of their friends, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, approaching the kitchen island with determined cheerfulness. Her smile was bright, practiced, the kind you use to paper over awkward moments at corporate events. Thank you, I said, unwrapping the imported brie. I thought they deserved the best for their big day. Absolutely, and what a gorgeous kitchen to serve it in. She gestured around expansively, and I could see the relief in her eyes at having found safe conversational territory. The renovation must have cost a fortune. I glanced at the gleaming appliances, the marble countertops, the custom cabinetry, all of it beautiful, all of it expensive. Oh, I'm sure it did. Though you know what they say about investment pieces. Sometimes you get what you pay for, sometimes you just pay for the brand name. The woman laughed nervously. Another friend joined us, drink in hand, eager to escape whatever tension still lingered in the other room. Dad makes the best cheese boards, my daughter's voice came from behind me. I could hear the forced lightness, the attempt to reclaim normal family dynamics. He's very particular about presentation. Attention to detail, I agreed, arranging crackers with deliberate precision. You learn that when you spend years making sure every dollar counts. I opened the wine, a bottle that had cost me half a day's wages. This refrigerator is impressive, by the way. Sub-Zero, right? Top of the line. It was David's splurge, my daughter said, moving to stand beside the island. I could feel her watching my hands as I worked. Smart investment, I nodded, pouring wine into their crystal glasses. Though, I have to say, for what these units cost, you'd think the ice maker would be quieter. Sounds like it's struggling a bit. Might need the filters checked. Common issue with this model. The blonde woman looked confused. It sounds fine to me. Give it 6 months, I said with a gentle chuckle. Background noise becomes white noise until something's actually wrong. Then you notice. I handed her a glass. But hey, that's what warranties are for, right? Assuming they registered it properly. My daughter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. David appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of normal conversation, relief evident on his face. Dad was just admiring your appliances, she said, and there was an edge underneath the words that only I would catch. The whole kitchen is beautiful, I continued, running my hand along the marble. Carrara marble, isn't it? Classic choice. Though I hope they sealed it properly, this grade can stain if you're not careful with acidic foods. I gestured at the wine, or red wine spills. The contractor assured us, David started. Oh, I'm sure he did, I interrupted gently. They always do. It's just that some of these installation crews, well, I shrugged. You hope they take the same care with details that you would in your own home. Another couple had drifted into the kitchen now, drawn by the promise of food and wine and normal conversation. The space was filling with people desperate to pretend the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. The cabinets are gorgeous too, one of them offered. Custom? Semi-custom, my daughter said quickly. From a showroom downtown. Ah, yes, I can tell. I opened another bottle, the cork coming free with a soft pop. Good quality hardware, though I noticed the door on that corner cabinet, I pointed, sits just slightly off square, probably settled during install. Nothing major, just one of those things you learn to live with. The kitchen had gone quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet. Not the shocked silence of our earlier confrontation, but the careful quiet of people beginning to understand that something else entirely was happening here. My daughter was staring at me now, her eyes bright with barely contained frustration. She understood exactly what I was doing, methodically cataloging flaws, questioning choices, undermining the perfection she wanted to project, all while smiling and serving wine to her guests. Dad, she said, her voice carefully controlled at, maybe you could tell everyone about that compass you brought? Of course, I said, pulling the small box from my pocket. Though first, let me finish getting everyone fed. That's what matters most, isn't it? Taking care of people? I met her eyes across the marble island, and in that moment, we both knew this was far from over. I pulled the small box from my pocket and set it on the marble counter, the gesture drawing everyone's attention away from their wine glasses. The wrapping paper was simple, understated, nothing like the elaborate bows and designer bags that seemed to fill every corner of their new life. "What's this?" the blonde woman asked, leaning forward with renewed interest. "A little housewarming gift," I said, watching Emily's face as she reluctantly approached. "Go ahead, open it." She unwrapped it carefully, almost reluctantly, and lifted the antique compass from its nest of tissue paper. The brass caught the kitchen lights, warm and worn from decades of use. "It's beautiful," David said, genuinely impressed. "Is it functional?" "Completely." I took it gently from Emily's hands, showing how the needle swung true. Belonged to a ship captain, according to the antique dealer. Guided him through some rough waters over the years. I looked at Emily. "I thought it was perfect for this moment in your lives. New house, new beginning, finding your true direction." The guests murmured appreciation, but I could see Emily's jaw tighten as she understood there was more to this gift than sentiment. "The thing about a compass," I continued, turning it over in my hands, "is that it only works when you remember where you came from. True north never changes, no matter how far you travel or how fancy your new coordinates get." "That's very thoughtful, Dad." Emily's voice was carefully controlled, but her eyes were telling a different story. I hope you'll keep it somewhere special, maybe on that beautiful mantle over there. I gestured toward the living room. So you can always remember that some things don't change just because your address does. The kitchen fell quiet again, the kind of silence that meant everyone was processing subtext they couldn't quite grasp, but definitely felt. The rest of the evening passed in carefully maintained pleasantries. More wine, more food, more conversations that skirted around the edges of what had really happened. But I could feel Emily watching me, could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the compass now sitting on the counter like an unexploded mine. Finally, mercifully, the last guests gathered their coats and made their excuses. Hugs were exchanged, promises to get together soon, compliments about the house and the food, and what a lovely evening it had been. David walked them to their cars while Emily and I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by empty glasses and the detritus of forced celebration. The moment the front door closed, she turned on me. "What the hell was that?" Her voice was sharp, all pretense dropped. "You humiliated me in front of my friends. Every word out of your mouth was designed to undermine me, to make me look bad. To what?" I interrupted calmly, still wiping down their marble counters. "To point out that your ice maker is loud? That your cabinets need an adjustment? What exactly did I say that was so terrible?" "You know exactly what you did." Her hands were shaking now, whether from anger or wine, I couldn't tell. The passive-aggressive comments, the little digs about quality and costs and contractors. You were trying to make me look like some spoiled brat who doesn't know what she's doing. And what did you do? I set the dish towel down and faced her fully. Let me see if I can remember the evening correctly. You greeted me at the door by treating me like a servant. You made me remove my shoes while everyone else kept theirs on. You told your husband, loud enough for me to hear, that I always make everything about me. Her face flushed. I didn't. You didn't what? Think I'd hear you? Think I'd care? I stepped closer, and for the first time all evening, I let some of the real emotion show. Let me tell you what I didn't do, Emily. I didn't mention that it was my $25,000 that made your down payment possible. I didn't tell your friends that the mortgage is in my name because your credit wasn't good enough. I didn't explain how I worked double shifts for 6 months to make sure you'd qualify for this loan. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. I didn't point out that I've been making half the payments since you moved in because David's promotion hasn't come through yet. I didn't share how you called me crying 3 months ago because you couldn't afford the property taxes. I picked up the compass from the counter, turning it over in my hands. I kept all of that private, Emily, even while you wiped your feet on me in front of people who wouldn't give you the time of day if they knew the truth. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of that expensive ice maker cycling through its loud, imperfect rhythm. I gave you respect tonight. I continued quietly. I let you play hostess in your beautiful house with your successful friends. All I asked for in return was to be treated like your father instead of your hired help. I set the compass down in front of her, but apparently a little bit of power went straight to your head. Emily stared at the compass, then at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to find a way to regain the high ground she'd thought she held. The balance of power had shifted, and we both knew it. For a moment, Emily just stared at me, the weight of financial reality settling over her perfect kitchen like a heavy blanket. Then something snapped. "You think you can hold that over me forever?" Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. "You think because you gave me money, you own me? That you can humiliate me in my own house and I should just take it?" "Emily, no." She slammed her hand on the marble counter, making the wine glasses jump. "I'm done with this guilt trip bullshit. You were supposed to help me. You're my father. That's what fathers do. They sacrifice for their children. You don't get credit for doing what you were supposed to do." I watched her unraveling, this woman who'd been so composed and controlled in front of her friends. The mask was coming off completely now. "And the money?" She laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "Please. You act like you handed me $25,000 in cash. It was your house, your equity. Money you never would have had if you hadn't gotten lucky with that dump of a property. You didn't sacrifice anything. You just moved paper around." Emily, that's not. It's not what? Not true? You want to talk about truth? Her eyes were bright with something dangerous now. The truth is, you're a mediocre contractor who peaked 20 years ago. The truth is, you needed to feel important, needed to be the big hero daddy, so you stuck your nose into our business. And now you think that gives you the right to come into my home and... What's going on in here? David's voice cut through her tirade. He stood in the doorway, keys still in his hand, looking between us with growing alarm. The last guests must have taken longer to leave than I'd thought. Nothing, Emily said quickly, but her face was flushed, her voice still pitched too high. Dad was just leaving. Actually, I wasn't. I kept my voice calm, watching David process the tension in the room. We were discussing some financial arrangements. Financial arrangements? David looked confused. What financial arrangements? Emily shot me a warning look, but I was past caring about her comfort now. The mortgage payments I've been making, I said simply. The ones that have kept you current for the past 6 months. David's face went white. What mortgage payments? Don't, Emily hissed. Don't you dare. But I could see the understanding dawning in David's eyes as he looked from me to his wife, pieces clicking into place. Emily, David said slowly, what is he talking about? It doesn't matter, she whirled on him, fury redirected. It doesn't matter because it's your fault he has any power over us at all. You're the one who can't handle your responsibilities. You're the one who promised me we could afford this place and then couldn't deliver. David stepped back as if she'd slapped him. Emily, no, I'm tired of making excuses for you. I'm tired of calling my father behind your back because you can't step up and be a man. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when you're the reason we're in this mess. The kitchen fell silent except for her ragged breathing. David stood frozen, and I could see the exact moment his world shifted when he realized the woman he'd married was capable of this level of cruelty. Emily, he said quietly, that's enough. Enough? She laughed again, that same ugly sound. Oh, now you want to be the man of the house? Now you want to stand up? Where was this when we needed the mortgage payments? Where was this when... Stop. David's voice was firm now, and I saw something in his face that reminded me why I'd liked him when they first started dating. Just stop. But Emily was past listening. She turned back to me, eyes blazing. You want to know what I think? I think you should leave. This is my house, and I want you out. And if you don't like it, maybe you should think about whether you really want to be part of this family anymore. The threat hung in the air between us. She was trying to use the ultimate weapon, cutting me off from her, from any future grandchildren, from the life I'd helped build. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. Not the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap, not the young woman I'd been so proud to walk down the aisle, just someone who'd gotten drunk on a small taste of power and forgotten where she came from. You know what, Emily? I picked up the compass from the counter, turning it over in my hands one last time. I think you're right. Maybe I should think about whether I want to be part of this family. I looked at David, who was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. I don't know how you want to handle this, David, but I know how I'm going to handle it. I'm done making those mortgage payments. I'm done being treated like the help in a house I made possible. When the bank calls asking where the money is, you two can figure it out yourselves. I set the compass down on the counter with a soft click. Good luck finding your direction without it. 3 days. That's how long it took. I was in my workshop, my barn, as Emily had so charmingly called it, when I heard the familiar sound of her BMW pulling into my gravel driveway. The engine cut off abruptly, followed by the sharp slam of car doors. Through the dusty window, I watched them approach. Emily marching ahead with that familiar, determined stride, her designer heels clicking against concrete like gunshots. David trailed behind, his shoulders hunched, looking like a man walking to his execution. The bank had started calling on Tuesday morning. First, just a polite inquiry about the late payment. By Tuesday afternoon, it was 3 calls. Wednesday brought the mortgage company, their automated system cheerfully reminding them about missed payments and potential fees. By Thursday morning, their perfect little world was already showing the first hairline cracks. I didn't bother rushing to the door. Just kept working on the old oak cabinet I was refinishing. A piece I'd found at an estate sale, solid wood from an era when things were built to last. The irony wasn't lost on me. My hands moved steadily with the sandpaper, following the grain, as Emily's sharp knocking escalated to full-blown pounding. "I know you're in there." Her voice carried through the thin walls of my modest home, pitched high with panic and fury. "Open this damn door. We need to talk." The sound of her cursing, something she'd never done as a child, made me pause. I set down the sandpaper, brushing the dust from my hands, and walked slowly through the house I'd built with my own labor 30 years ago. The house where she'd taken her first steps, spoken her first words, cried over her first broken heart. The house that had apparently become nothing more than a barn the moment she found something shinier. I opened the door to find her red-faced and trembling, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled, her makeup smudged around her eyes. Behind her, David stood with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, unable to meet my gaze. "How could you do this to me?" The words exploded out of her before I'd even fully opened the door. "The bank has called 17 times since Tuesday. 17! They're talking about acceleration clauses and default notices and foreclosure proceedings. You said you'd help with the payments." I leaned against the doorframe, studying this woman who used to be my little girl. The panic in her eyes was real, but so was the entitlement. Even in crisis, even when her world was crumbling, she still believed she was owed something. "I said I had been making the payments," I corrected, my voice deliberately calm. "Past tense. That arrangement ended the moment you decided to treat me like hired help in the house those payments made possible. But we had an understanding." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I glimpsed the fear underneath the anger. You can't just abandon us like this." "No, Emily. You had assumptions. I had a daughter who used to show me respect." I looked past her to David, who was studying the cracked concrete of my driveway like it held the secrets of the universe. "Come inside. Both of you. The neighbors don't need to hear this." They followed me into my living room. Simple, unfashionable, but honest. The same room where Emily had built pillow forts and practiced violin recitals, where she'd cried when boys broke her heart and celebrated when she got into college. The worn leather couch still bore the indent from all those nights she'd fallen asleep watching old movies with me, her head on my shoulder, trusting and safe. Now she looked around the space like she was seeing it through her friend's eyes. The outdated furniture, the mismatched lamps, the absence of marble countertops and designer fixtures. "This is absolutely insane," she said, beginning to pace in the small space like a caged animal. "You're destroying my entire life over what? Your wounded pride? Because I asked you to take off your muddy boots in my house?" "Emily." David's voice was quiet, but there was something new in it, something I hadn't heard before. "I think there might have been more to it than shoes." She whirled on him, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare start with me. This is your fault, too. If you could actually handle your responsibilities like a man, if you could provide for your wife the way you promised, we wouldn't need his help at all." The words hit David like a physical blow. I watched him flinch, watched his face go pale, and felt a surge of something protective. Whatever my issues with Emily, David had always been decent to me. Kind, respectful, genuine in his affection for my daughter. "Emily." David's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it, and she must have heard the change too because she stopped pacing. "That's enough." "Enough?" She laughed, but it was brittle, desperate. "I'm about to lose everything. My house, my reputation, my entire life, because my father is having a middle-aged temper tantrum, and you think I should just calm down?" "Actually," David said, and I watched him straighten his shoulders, finding some backbone I didn't know he possessed. "I think I need some answers, from both of you." His eyes found mine, steady now. "How much money have you been giving us? Because Emily told me her salary was covering most of our major expenses." The color drained from Emily's face so quickly I thought she might faint. "David, this isn't." "No." His voice cut through her protests like a blade. "I want to know. I've been lying awake at night for months, wondering how we could afford that house on our combined income. I've been wondering why you never seemed stressed about money when I was losing sleep over our budget, wondering if I was failing as a provider." He turned to look at his wife, and I could see the hurt radiating from him. So tell me, what exactly have you been lying to me about? Emily opened and closed her mouth several times, looking between us like a trapped animal. The silence stretched out, heavy with unspoken truths, until I realized she wasn't going to answer. The down payment was $25,000 from the equity in this house, I said finally, each word carefully measured. The mortgage is in my name because her credit history wasn't sufficient for the loan amount. I've been making approximately half of your monthly payments for the past 6 months. I also covered the property tax bill when it came due in December, and I paid for the new roof repair after that storm in February. David sat down heavily on my old couch, the leather creaking under his weight. He put his head in his hands and his voice came out muffled. 6 months. You've been lying to me for 6 months. I was protecting you. And Emily's voice climbed to a near shriek. I was protecting our marriage. You were already stressed about work, about the promotion that kept getting delayed, about money. I didn't want you to feel like a complete failure. So instead, you let me feel crazy for worrying about bills we supposedly couldn't afford. David looked up, and I could see the betrayal written across his features. You let me think I was paranoid, that I was being unreasonable when I said we were living beyond our means. David, please, you have to understand. How much? He looked directly at me, ignoring her pleas. Total. How much money are we talking about? I did the quick calculation in my head, adding up months of mortgage payments, the down payment, the taxes, the repairs, including everything, close to $60,000. The number seemed to echo in the small room. David made a sound like he'd been punched, and Emily went completely still. 60,000, David repeated slowly. $60,000 that you never mentioned, that you actively hid from me. He looked at his wife with something approaching wonder. Do you have any idea what that knowledge would have meant to me? Do you understand how many nights I lay awake thinking I was failing you? Emily looked between us desperately, and I could practically see her mind racing, trying to find an angle, a way to regain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond her reach. Fine, she said suddenly, her voice turning cold and sharp as winter wind. You want to destroy my life over this? Go ahead, but don't think for 1 second that there won't be consequences. You'll never see your grandchildren when I have them. You'll never be welcome in my home again. You'll never be part of any family celebration, any holiday, any important moment. I'll make sure David's family knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Selfish, controlling, manipulative. The threats hung in the air like poison, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. This was my daughter wielding the ultimate weapons: isolation, shame, the severing of family bonds. But before I could respond, David stood up slowly, his face harder than I'd ever seen it. Emily, stop talking. Right now. Don't tell me to stop. He needs to understand what he's throwing away. He's choosing his precious ego over his own family. He's choosing his dignity over being used, David said quietly, but with absolute certainty. And after everything I've heard today, I don't blame him. Emily stared at her husband like he'd sprouted a second head. You're taking his side? After everything we've built together, after all our plans, you're going to side with him? I'm trying to understand how my wife has been systematically lying to me for months while her father drained his retirement savings to keep us afloat. David's voice was steady now, resolved. And I'm trying to understand why she thinks threatening him with the very grandchildren his money helped make possible is somehow the moral high ground. I never asked him to. Yes, you did, I said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. My voice was calm, almost gentle. Maybe not in so many words, but you asked. Every time you called crying about money, every time you mentioned how tight things were, every time you let me believe that helping you was what a good father does. I stood up, moving to the window that looked out on my small, tidy yard. I thought I was supporting my daughter through a difficult time. I didn't realize I was enabling her to manipulate both of us. That's not what I was doing. But even as she said it, I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. Then what would you call it? I turned back to face her. You let David think you were financially stable while secretly depending on me. You let me think you were grateful for my help while treating me like an embarrassment in front of your friends. You played us against each other, keeping secrets from both sides, while benefiting from our separate contributions. The room fell silent, except for the steady tick of the old mantel clock my father had given me when I bought this house. Emily looked around the space, really looked at it, and I wondered if she was remembering the life we'd shared here. The Christmas mornings, the birthday parties, the quiet evenings when it had just been the two of us against the world. I never meant for it to be, she started, but the words died in her throat. Yes, you did, I said, not unkindly. You meant every word you said and every choice you made. The only question now is, what happens next? David was staring at his wife with an expression I recognized all too well. It was the same look I'd worn 3 nights ago in their kitchen. The moment when you realize the person you love has become someone you don't know at all. Emily, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? Because the woman I married wouldn't have done any of this. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For the first time in years, I watched my daughter struggle to find words. The woman who had always had an answer for everything, who had always known exactly how to turn any situation to her advantage, stood speechless in my modest living room. She started, then stopped. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the worn furniture, the simple decorations, the evidence of a life lived without pretense. I'm your wife, she said finally, but even she seemed to hear how hollow it sounded. David shook his head slowly. No. The woman I married wouldn't have lied to me for months, wouldn't have manipulated her own father, wouldn't have threatened to keep children away from their grandfather as punishment. He stood up, moving toward the door. I need some time to think. David, wait. Emily reached for him, but he was already walking away. I'll be at my brother's, he called back without turning around. When you figure out who you really are, let me know. The front door closed with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the house. Emily and I stood there in the sudden silence, and I realized this was the first time we'd been truly alone together in years. Dad, she whispered, and for just a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to run to me when storms scared her. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to see past the anger and manipulation to find some trace of the daughter I'd raised. What did you mean for Emily? She slumped into my old armchair, suddenly looking older than her 32 years. I wanted to feel successful, important, like I'd made it, you know? She gestured weakly around the room. I didn't want to end up back here in this little house living a small life. And what's wrong with a small life? I asked gently. What's wrong with honest work, with paying your own bills, with treating people with respect? Nothing's wrong with it, she said quickly. For some people, but I wanted more. I deserved more. There it was, the heart of it all. The belief that she was entitled to more than she'd earned, that wanting something badly enough meant she should have it regardless of the cost to others. I sat down across from her, in the same chair where I'd read her bedtime stories, where I'd helped her with homework, where I'd listened to her dreams and fears for 25 years. You know what I think you deserved, Emily? I said quietly, you deserved parents who taught you that respect goes both ways. You deserve to learn early that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. You deserve to understand that character matters more than marble countertops. She looked up at me, tears starting to form in her eyes. Are you saying you failed me? I'm saying we both did. I leaned back, feeling suddenly tired. I failed you by making it too easy to take me for granted, and you failed yourself by choosing comfort over character. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. So what happens now? I picked up the compass from where it sat on my coffee table, watching the needle settle on true north. Now you get to decide who you really want to be, and I get to decide how much disrespect I'm willing to accept in the name of family. Dad, I love you, Emily. I will always love you. I met her eyes, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt completely at peace. But I won't be treated like hired help in a life I helped make possible. If you can't show me basic respect, then we don't have a relationship worth preserving. She stood up slowly, and I could see her processing the reality of consequences. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, her actions had led to genuine loss with no easy way back. The compass, she said, looking at it in my hands. You said it was about finding true direction. It is. What's yours? I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in weeks. North. Always north. Toward truth, toward dignity, toward relationships built on mutual respect. I held the compass out to her. The question is, what's yours? She stared at it for a long moment, then shook her head. I don't know yet. Then you have some work to do. After she left, I sat in my quiet house and realized something important. I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant weight of walking on eggshells, of managing someone else's emotions, of accepting disrespect in the name of peace. It was gone. Some people think family means accepting whatever treatment you're given because blood is thicker than water. But I learned something different. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's just enabling. The compass sits on my mantle now, pointing true north just as it always has. Some directions never change, no matter how much pressure you put on them to point elsewhere. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices, even when that someone is your own child. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.